The woman who knocked at midnight. The knock came at 12:17 a.m. soft. Not urgent, not desperate, the kind of knock that sounds like someone has already run out of pride, options, and time. I opened the door, and my breath caught. Standing under the porch light was my ex-mother-in-law, Margaret Collins. The woman who'd barely spoken to me in 4 years. The woman who chose her son's side when my marriage fell apart. The woman who once looked at me like a stranger, after nearly a decade of me calling her family. She was clutching a worn black handbag, shoulders shaking in the cold Ohio air. Her first words were barely a whisper. "I have nowhere left to go." If stories about second chances and quiet kindness mean something to you, take a second to like this video and subscribe. It helps more people find these stories. I just stared at her for a long moment. I was 39, living alone in a modest house outside Columbus. It had taken me years to rebuild after the divorce from Rebecca, years of bitterness and heartbreak I'd finally put behind me. When my marriage ended, most people vanished from my life. Margaret was one of them. And yet here she was, smaller than I remembered, frightened. I stepped aside and let her in. The warmth of the house seemed to undo her a little. She sat at my kitchen table while I made tea, her eyes drifting over the family photos, the bookshelves, the quiet life I'd built out of the wreckage of my past. Neither of us said anything for a while. Then slowly her story came out. Her husband had died 2 years earlier. Rebecca and her new husband convinced Margaret to sell the family home, told her it was the smart move, that she'd always have a place with them. For a while, it worked. Then the spare room got needed for something else. Then the small arguments turned into bigger ones. Margaret never complained. She didn't want to be a burden. So she moved from relative to relative, each stay shorter than the last, until that night, someone finally told her it was time to go. She was 70 years old, and her whole life fit in one handbag. Sitting at my table, she started to cry. It wasn't what she'd done years ago that got to me. It was simpler than that. Nobody should feel this unwanted. Especially not someone who'd spent her whole life taking care of everyone else. What came after changed us both. Margaret moved into my guest room just temporarily, we told ourselves. She started tending the flower beds. I'd let go wild. She baked the way she used to, filling the house with smells I hadn't realized I missed. She laughed more than I remembered her ever laughing. We told stories, some carefully, skirting old wounds, others head-on. One rainy evening, she finally said the things she'd been carrying. She told me she regretted abandoning me. That fear had driven every choice back then. Fear of losing her daughter, fear of losing her grandchildren, fear of picking the wrong side. In trying to hold her family together, she'd helped push away someone who'd once been family too. No big speech. No dramatic apology. Just honesty. And somehow that was enough. Months went on, and our strange, unlikely friendship kept growing. Then one afternoon, everything shifted again. A lawyer called. A distant cousin Margaret barely knew had passed away and left her a small inheritance. Nothing life-changing, but enough. Enough for her own apartment. Enough to start over. I expected her to be thrilled. Instead, I found her crying quietly on the back porch. When I asked why, she gave me a smile that held both relief and something sadder. For the first time in years, she said, "I have somewhere to go. I'm just not sure I want to leave." That hit me harder than I expected, because somewhere in all of this, my quiet, lonely house had become a home again. Not because of the furniture, because of her. A week later, Margaret moved into a small apartment 10 minutes away. But she never really left. Sunday dinners, homemade pies, a phone call every Wednesday, just to check in. The relationship the divorce had taken from us had come back in a completely different shape, stronger this time, built on choice instead of obligation. Before we get to the end, has anyone ever given you a second chance when you needed it most? Or have you given one yourself? I'd love to hear it in the comments. A year later, at Thanksgiving, my table was full, friends, neighbors, family. Margaret sat right in the middle of it, smiling brighter than I'd seen in years. Looking around that room, something clicked into place. Family isn't only what survives a marriage. It isn't only blood. Sometimes it's built out of forgiveness. Sometimes it grows from a kindness nobody asked for. And sometimes it shows up at your door after midnight, carrying nothing but a handbag and a broken heart. If this one got to you, share it with someone who still believes in second chances, and subscribe if you want more stories like it. That midnight knock could have ended Margaret's story. Instead, it started a new one for both of us. Because sometimes the people who have nowhere left to go are exactly the ones who lead us home.